Fights for freedom, modern Africa and Latin America. The inquiry question we're going to be asking is, what is necessary for freedom? The purpose of this video is to help you navigate some of the distance learning materials that you're going to be studying over the next 2 weeks, and to give you some background and context so that the readings, frankly, make a little more sense. So, welcome. We hope you're continuing to stay safe and healthy while we engage in distance learning. Over the next 2 weeks, you're going to have the opportunity to learn about African independence movements so that you can answer the question, what is necessary for freedom? If you need more access to the readings or unit resources, everything is still available at bit.ly/DCPS_ICP, and you can get the packets and corresponding coursework at your local school as well. Okay, let's go over a little bit of background before we jump in. Connection to Unit 2. The first time that we saw some of these countries was actually in Unit 2, when we were first studying Algeria or the Congo or Kenya. I know that a lot of us studied those. We looked at African maps that originally in the mid-1500s looked like this, and then by 1880s looked sort of like this. We see some colonial presence. And then by 1914, we notice a drastic change. There's a huge colonial presence. In fact, side by side, we can see that what was a lot of wide open, uncolonized land by 1913 becomes colonized. What happened? Well, in 1885, European countries met in Berlin to divide Africa. We called this the Scramble for Africa to exploit labor and resources. The Berlin Conference was the conference where European powers decided where they were going to set up their colonies. And then by 1914, we see the result. Almost 90% of the African continent was under formal European control. Okay, so that's the first time we saw some of these countries. But after that, we've studied several units like World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. And so now we're kind of coming back to those countries to see, are they still under colonial control, and really to see how they fight for their independence. But before we do that, we need to take care of some vocab. One word you're going to hear a lot this unit is Pan-Africanism. So what does that mean? Okay, broad strokes. Pan-Africanism is the ideology and movement to unify Africans with people of the African diasporas. I'm gonna define this in just a moment. And the aims to uplift and unify culturally people of African descent. You can kind of think of Pan-Africanism as a couple of ideas wrapped up in one. You can think of it as like the liberation of Africa and people of African descent. You can think of it as a response to exploitation and colonial dispossession and even attempted genocide. And also positively like the celebration and unity of African culture. Pan-Africanists envision a unified African nation where all people of the diaspora can live. So when we hear that term, you're going to have more of an idea of what this means kind of moving forward. We mentioned so many early voices for Pan-Africanism emphasize commonalities between the struggle between Africans and black people in the United States, like the African American experience. So a quote that kind of embodies this comes from Malcolm X. You can't understand what's going on in Mississippi if you don't understand what's going on in the Congo. And you can't really be interested in what's going on in Mississippi if you're not also interested in what's going on in the Congo. They're both the same. The same interests are at stake. So the unification of the struggle is part of this idea of Pan-Africanism. Now we mentioned the diaspora and the definition. When you hear diasporas, we're talking about communities throughout the world that exist because people in the past have a connection to or moved from Africa. So as we can see here, it's just, do you have a connection to Africa? Depending on, you could live in somewhere else now. Like you could live in Latin America, you could live in Europe. It's like if you are black and have a connection to Africa, you're part of the diaspora. And so we can also think, I've kind of have it here, you can think of it as the diaspora coming in several waves. There's lots of ways to think about it. The one that we've probably talked about in class is this one right here, the Pan-Atlantic slave trade. 1500s to 1800s, where a lot of people were forcibly, removed from Africa. Okay, now some things happened between the 1880s and 1960s. For one, World War II weakens European powers. So European countries that held colonies in Africa were not in a position to maintain those colonies. And also some European powers, after fighting alongside, the British, fighting alongside their colonial soldiers against the Nazis, realized the injustice of fighting, as they fought alongside colonial troops. It'd be very strange to go back and not think about independence for those colonial troops. And so this unit is really going to dig in to what African leaders believe freedom is, what methods should be used to gain independence, and how African countries should relate to other African countries. That's really what this unit is going to be all about. So as you can see here on the map, different countries gain independence at different dates, and it's this movement, this independence movement, that we're really going to look at. What is freedom? Is it just being politically free? And how do you acquire freedom? And these are deep questions, and we're going to read from some very powerful leaders on what they believe freedom is. Okay, so what are you actually going to do? Well, you're going to have, first you're going to do a See, Think, Wonder chart. Many of you can read the instructions and figure that out. After that, there's going to be some readings, and you're going to have choices, and then you'll have to fill out a chart that looks like this. For instance, we have like Dr. Nkrumah here of Ghana, and you're going to have to answer like what he believes freedom is if you decide to select reading B. And you'll basically just fill out the chart thinking about what is freedom, what's required for freedom. After that, you're going to do some research. You're going to have some choices, and you get to choose which country or countries you're going to do research on. For instance, you may stick with Dr. Nkrumah here in Ghana and decide to learn more about Ghana and its own independence movement. Was it violent, nonviolent, etc.? And then at the end, the performance task looks like this. You're going to end up writing a 5-paragraph essay that's going to explain how one African country gained independence and what happened after and what was necessary for freedom. What did freedom look like for that country? Okay, you can use the template and the outline that's all attached here. So you're going to have some choices, and you'll get to know what these concepts mean a lot deeper. And ultimately, you're going to answer the question for yourself. What is necessary for freedom?